So just last week, we got a heap of new Avatar Frontiers of Pandora news, mostly in the form of a bunch of new gameplay from some very lucky content creators who were flown out to Sweden to actually get hands-on with the game. And so today I wanted to give my initial thoughts on the game so far from all of the new info that's been revealed. Now, I've cut up a bunch of gameplay from some of these creators and wanted to give those guys a shout out. Throughout the video, you will see their names down in the bottom left of the screen, so be sure to go and check out their channels too to see the original content as well as getting their thoughts and opinions too. So a big thank you to those guys for their awesome footage. Now, the first thing that I've got to say from all of the gameplay and even just from a lot of the trailers and stuff that they've released in the past is that this game looks absolutely stunning. It definitely looks like a next-gen game, which it obviously is. For those who didn't know, this is only on next-gen, or I guess current-gen consoles, as well as obviously PC too. And I have to say that it looks absolutely amazing. Now, I haven't seen the new Avatar movie. I will definitely be watching that in the lead up to this game. But I do remember in the original one, even way back like 10 years ago, this looked absolutely insane. It was pretty much the selling point for the movie, that it looked so damn good. Everything is so vibrant and just looks so awesome in that movie. And it seems like they have pretty much lived up to that in the form of the game rather than a movie, which I think is actually really important. Generally speaking, I'm not, overly crucial when it comes to graphics. I think the gameplay and all that is way more important than the graphics. But I think when you're doing an Avatar game where the pretty much selling point of the first movie, like I said, was that it looked amazing, you kind of have to live up to that when it comes to making a game. And it definitely seems like they've done that. So that's the first thing that stood out to me, was just how this game looks. And from what I've seen as well, it also looks and sounds completely immersive, which is definitely very important when it comes to the Avatar franchise. Now, something that actually really surprised me is the lack of UI on screen when you're playing. It looks very minimal, and that is something that Ubisoft is not really known for, to be honest. If anything, Ubisoft is known for their kind of over-the-top UI in a lot of games that they release, no matter which dev team actually works on it. But it seems as though they have clearly taken on some feedback here, because when you're looking at the gameplay, there's really not that much going on your screen. And for me personally, I'm a big fan of that. When it comes to UI, for me, I think having the least amount of stuff on your screen is the best way to do it, as long as you are providing all of the necessary information. So you need to have your health, you need to have some sort of navigation to help find where you need to be. And, little things like maybe showing the weapon that you've got or the amount of ammo, stuff like that. There's certain things that need to be shown on screen, but a lot of the time in Ubisoft games, there's not just Ubisoft games, there is plenty of other games out there that do this. They have way too much information on the screen, and although sure it may give you little bits of extra information, it does become very cluttered, and it kind of takes away from the immersion of the game, as well as actually somewhat ruining the experience, because instead of going and trying to just explore and find random things throughout the world, it's almost like the game is pretty much telling you where to go, and it's almost just holding your hand through that game. So I'm very big on like minimalistic UI in especially single player games. I think when it's multiplayer, it's maybe a bit different, but in a single player game, I want the least amount of information on screen as possible. And it really does seem like they've actually taken that on board from a lot of the feedback they have been given from their previous games. Now, I also thought the gunplay and just the combat in general actually looks really solid. Now, obviously this team worked on The Division, and those games have pretty solid gunplay, I would say, but it does seem to be kind of a step up in this game, and obviously it looks very, very good in first person. I was especially blown away by the assault rifle gameplay. That looked like it would be as good as any gunplay in any, big shooter out there, Call of Duty and those type of games. It genuinely looked really, really good. And that's honestly something I didn't really expect. I knew that they had the bow and arrow combat, and they've done that before in Far Cry. Obviously it's a different team, but Ubisoft have done that before. And so I kind of knew that that would be handled well, because I feel like bow and arrow gameplay is a little bit easier to animate, and it's just a little bit more simple than firing proper weapons, for example. But obviously, once again, in Far Cry, they have used proper rifles and stuff before, and they were done really well in that game. So I was interested to see how it would go in this game, especially being in the Avatar universe. I wasn't sure if it would look a little bit weird or if it would play well at all. But from what I've seen so far and from what everyone was saying who got to play the game, the gunplay is actually really solid. So that is a big plus. I think the combat in this game needs to be good, because I think when you're playing essentially a first-person shooter, the combat is essentially the most important thing. Yes, it is open world. Yes, the exploration and stuff needs to be good too. But I do think that the gameplay and the gunplay in general definitely need to be solid, and it definitely seems like they are solid so far from what we've seen. Something else that looks absolutely amazing is flying on your Ikran, which are those big like flying creatures. Everyone who played the game seems to say that they feel really smooth and very fun to play. Watching the gameplay, it kind of looks hard to tell if it would play well or not. It kind of looks like it is a little bit on rails in a way, but everyone was saying that it plays really smooth and you have a lot of control over the Ikran. So that does look like it adds a bit of a, I guess, interesting dynamic to the game, because obviously when it comes to a game like Far Cry, for example, that is similar in a lot of ways to Avatar, that game does not have the ability to fly around like this. Now, yes, some of them have had like the hang glider thing I remember in Far Cry 3, but it isn't quite the same. You had to jump from a very high location. In this, you can just get onto the Ikran whenever you want, and essentially it can take you wherever you want to go. So I'm glad that they have nailed that from what everyone's saying about it, and I think that is going to be a very fun dynamic when it comes to Avatar. Now, speaking of the Ikrans, the customization seems to be pretty cool, as limited as it is. Obviously, this isn't the type of game that's going to have like unreal customization because it's first person, but there is still some customization. Apparently, you can customize your Na'vi at the beginning of the game, and then there are apparently some customizations you can make to your Ikran as well as actually being able to choose their name, which I thought was cool. There are 10 different options to choose from, and then throughout the rest of the game, your character will actually refer to the Ikran by its name. It will say it out loud rather than just naming it whatever you want, and then obviously it never actually gets spoken. So I thought that was pretty cool, and little touches like that I do think add a lot to games like this where it is trying to be really immersive, especially in a universe like Avatar. Now, in terms of some of the concerns that I have, and I do have a full video coming on this, so I'll kind of elaborate on these a little bit more in that video. But even though I just said about the UI looking really good, I am actually worried about the lack of UI making it a bit too hard to actually find things. Everyone who played mentioned that it is pretty hard actually to find where you need to be going. A lot of people were getting lost in the very first mission that they got dropped into, and it's not even just because of the UI, but it just actually gives you large areas where you need to be. It'll tell you to go to that location, but then in those areas you still have to kind of search all over the place to find what you need, which is apparently very difficult. So I'm a little bit concerned about that they've kind of gone too far away from the UI, and I do think in certain situations that's a good thing. I think when you just have to explore and find things on your own, that's a good experience, but when it comes to like a main story path, that is probably not a good thing. I want to know where I need to be when it comes to actually progressing the main storyline, and hopefully that is not too big of an issue with that lack of UI. It does also look very similar to Far Cry. It is, from what everyone is saying, essentially Far Cry on Pandora, and while I love Far Cry and I'm actually really excited to play a game similar to that but in a different universe, I do worry that it will be essentially too similar to where nothing is really improved and it is literally just Far Cry on Pandora. I'm all for making it similar. I think that's a good thing because Far Cry is a really good foundation for a game like this, but I do think if you're going to make it similar, you've probably got to make it similar but make it improved and also push the boundaries. The fact that this is in a universe that is so insane like Avatar, where there's just so much crazy stuff that can go on, I think they really should try to push the boundaries a bit, and I hope it isn't just too similar to Far Cry in that sense. So those are a couple of concerns that I have, but obviously I will delve a little bit deeper. I'm going to be watching a heap more gameplay and getting everyone's thoughts to better formulate my concerns as well. So like I said, keep your eyes peeled for that video down the line. Overall though, I personally think the game does look really solid. I was a bit unsure until all of this recent gameplay. The initial trailers and stuff had me thinking it could be really good or it could kind of suck. I wasn't really too sure, but the recent gameplay as well as all the news that came out has got me super excited to play, and rest assured there will be a hell of a lot of content on the way in the lead up to launch, giving you guys all the details you need to know, as well as plenty of tips and tricks after launch too. I'm keen to hear your thoughts on the game so far, so be sure to let me know down in the comment section. But with that being said, thank you all very much for watching. You guys have a great day, and I'll catch you all in the next one.